Welcome to Monk's Moon Temple. As you settle into this moment, let your awareness gently descend from the busy surface of your day, down through the layers of thought and sensation, to arrive here, in the simplicity of just listening. Perhaps close your eyes, or simply soften your gaze. Notice the feeling of the air as it enters your body, and as it leaves. There is nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to do. In this space, we are not adding anything. We are, instead, creating a quiet clearing. A sanctuary within. I invite you to let go of the weight of your words, the burden of your narratives, and for the next while, simply be a vessel, open and receptive, to the ancient, gentle wisdom of silence. I recall a time, early in my own seeking, when I believed wisdom was accumulated, like stones in a bag. I would read, discuss, debate, filling my mind with concepts and philosophies. I was proud of my ability to articulate, to dissect an idea. Yet, I felt a strange emptiness, a dryness of spirit. One autumn, I visited a remote monastery, not as a student, but to perform a simple task, helping to sweep the endless courtyards of fallen leaves. For the first 2 days, I swept and I talked. In my mind, I held imaginary conversations, explained Buddhist principles to myself, composed clever questions for the abbot. My sweeping was frantic, noisy within. On the third day, an old monk, whose name I never learned, came and swept beside me. He did not speak. He simply swept. His movements were rhythmic, effortless, a slow dance with the broom. I matched my pace to his. The internal chatter, deprived of its fuel, began to sputter. An hour passed in quiet companionship, the only sound the soft swish-swish of birch twigs on stone. And then, in that shared, wordless space, a profound understanding washed over me, not as a thought, but as a felt reality. The leaves were not a problem to be solved. They were simply leaves, returning to the earth. My life was not a problem to be solved with words. It was simply life, to be lived, sweep by gentle sweep. In that silence, I didn't learn anything new. I unlearned the noise that separated me from the sacred simplicity of the task, and the world itself. That was the first real teaching I ever received. This is the heart of the Buddhist path. It is a path of subtraction, not addition. The Buddha did not come with a list of things to believe, but with a method to see clearly, to remove the obstructions of craving and aversion that cloud our true nature. And one of the most pervasive obstructions, one we rarely examine, is our compulsive relationship with our own voice. We use speech not just to communicate, but to assert, to defend, to manipulate, to fill voids, to create a self we can present to the world. Buddhism asks us to consider right speech, which is profoundly linked to right mindfulness. To be mindful is to witness the impulse to speak before it becomes sound. In that gap lies our freedom. Consider the mind as a vast, open sky. Thoughts are weather patterns, clouds of memory, lightning bolts of insight, gentle rains of sadness, warm fronts of joy. Our habitual speech is like a person standing in a field, constantly commenting on the weather. That cloud is ominous. This sunshine won't last. I prefer cumulus clouds to cirrus. This narration adds nothing to the sky. It simply creates a secondary layer of phenomena, the phenomenon of the commentator, that we then mistake for ourselves. Silence is the practice of putting down the microphone. It is sitting in the field, feeling the wind, watching the weather of the mind come and go, without identifying with the announcer. You are not the commentary. You are the aware space in which both the weather and the commentary appear. When you realize this, speech transforms. It is no longer a leak of your being, but a conscious choice, a gentle movement within the stillness. Here is a story, a first offering from the hearth of Monk's Moon Temple. In a village famed for its pottery, there was a master potter named Alara. Her pots were not just vessels, they seemed to hold stillness itself. People claimed water stayed cooler in them, and flowers lived longer. Alara worked in a sun-drenched studio, her will humming a constant, low note. Yet, she herself was quiet. She did not sing as she worked, nor did she entertain visitors with tales of her craft. She listened, to the clay, to the wheel's hum, to the sound of her own breath mingling with the process. A young, ambitious potter named Leo came to apprentice with her. Leo was talented but full of ideas. As he worked, he would talk incessantly. He'd explain his technique to the air, critique the clay's consistency, plan his next masterpiece aloud, and hum competing, complex tunes over the wheel's drone. His pots were technically proficient but carried a strange tension. They were beautiful, but they felt brittle, as if holding their breath. One afternoon, Alara asked him to make a simple water jar. Leo began, his hands moving, his voice a steady stream. Alara watched for a moment, then she did something unexpected. She reached over and gently placed her fingers on the base of his spinning wheel, adjusting its tension. The wheel's hum changed. It deepened, becoming richer, more resonant. The very vibration in the room shifted. "Listen," she said softly. Leo, mid-sentence, stopped. He listened. The new hum seemed to vibrate in his bones. It wasn't just a sound, it was a feeling. Alara removed her hand. "The wheel has a voice," she said. "Your clay hears it. Your hands feel it. When you fill the air with your own noise, you drown out the wheel's song. The clay cannot find its center in a storm of words. It becomes confused, and its form holds that confusion. Your job is not to dictate to the clay, but to become so quiet that you can hear what the clay, guided by the wheel's song, wants to become." Leo was skeptical but intrigued. For the next week, he attempted to work in silence. It was agonizing. His thoughts screamed. He felt foolish. But he persisted, focusing on the deep hum of the wheel, letting it become the anchor for his attention. Slowly, his internal chatter began to settle, not because he forced it, but because it was drawn into the larger, more stable frequency of the wheel. One day, as he centered a lump of clay, his hands moved with a new kind of intelligence, not his thinking intelligence, but a tactile, listening intelligence. He felt the clay's resistance, its willingness, its perfect point of balance. The pot that emerged was unlike any he had made before. It was humble, strong, and radiated a palpable sense of peace. He understood. His previous speech had been a barrier, a static between his intention and the intelligence of the moment. True creation, like true living, requires an inner silence that allows us to tune into a deeper frequency, the hum of reality itself. If this story has resonated within you, like the deep hum of that potter's wheel, please consider supporting the Monk's Moon Temple. By subscribing, you help to maintain this quiet space in the noisy digital world. Your subscription is a gentle affirmation, a shared commitment to cultivating inner peace. Please, click subscribe and ring the notification bell. It means more than you know. Thank you. Now, let us explore why this silence feels so difficult. We fear it as we fear the dark, imagining monsters in its depths. But what we are truly afraid of is meeting the one who has been speaking all along, the constructed self, the narrator of our personal story. This self is made of memories, opinions, preferences, and constant self-referential thought. It thrives on speech, both internal and external, because each utterance reinforces its existence. I think this. I want that. I am this kind of person. To be silent is to stop feeding this construct. In the quiet, its edges begin to soften. This can feel like dissolution, like death. It is. It is the death of the illusion, and the birth of what is real. There was a meticulous cartographer named Kalen, employed by a king to map the vast northern forests. Kalen never entered the forest. He sat in his tower, and travelers, hunters, and merchants would come to him. He would interview them, asking precise questions, and from their often conflicting stories, he would draw his maps. His maps were beautiful works of art, filled with notations: here be wolves, per old Finn, swift river here, arguable, per merchant Roland. He spoke constantly, cross-examining his sources, debating the placement of a hill. His world was the world of the map, a representation built entirely from second-hand words. One year, the king demanded a map of the mysterious heartwood, the forest's deep interior, from which few returned. Kalen's sources failed him. Frustrated, and fearing the king's wrath, he was forced to go himself. The moment he stepped under the canopy, his world of words shattered. The forest was not a list of features. It was a symphony of scent, sound, light, and shadow. His map talk was useless. He tried to narrate his journey, massive oak, note for map. But the living oak, with its moss and whispering leaves, defied his notes. He got lost almost immediately. His carefully constructed identity as the all-knowing mapmaker crumbled into fear and disorientation. Days passed. His food ran low. Exhausted and despairing, he finally stopped trying to map, to name, to understand. He sank to the mossy ground and simply wept. When the tears subsided, he was just a man, alone in an immense, silent forest. He had no words left. In that wordless state, a strange thing began to happen. He started to feel the direction of the water through the humidity in the air. He noticed subtle animal paths not by sight, but by a felt sense of openness. He observed the moss growth on trees, a silent compass. He was no longer a cartographer over the land, he was a creature within it, listening to its silent language. He found water. He found food. He found his way, not to the other side, but to a small, sun-drenched clearing he felt no need to put on a map. He sat for a long time, his mind as still as the forest pool beside him. He had entered the territory, and in doing so, had let go of the desperate need for the map. When he finally returned, he was changed. He presented the king with a single, blank parchment. "Sire," he said, his voice quiet. "The heartwood cannot be mapped. It can only be experienced. The only accurate guide is a silent, attentive heart." The king, a wise man, understood. He framed the blank parchment as a reminder that the greatest truths reside beyond the kingdom of words. We are all mapmakers, living in the towers of our conceptual minds. Our thoughts and speech are the maps we constantly draw and defend. We argue over whose map is right, terrified of the blank parchment, the unmediated experience. Silence is the courageous act of stepping into the heartwood of direct experience. It is frightening because we must temporarily surrender our identity as the knowledgeable mapmaker. But in that surrender, we discover we are not separate from the territory. We are the living land, aware of itself. The silence is not empty, it is full of the intelligence of life, an intelligence that guides us when we stop telling it where to go. This is a core teaching of the Buddha. He often spoke of suchness or thusness, tathata. It is the reality of things as they are, prior to our labels, judgments, and stories. Our compulsive speech is the primary tool with which we avoid suchness. We see a rose and immediately say, beautiful, or it will wilt soon, or I wish I had roses. The word beautiful is not the rose. The anticipation of wilting is not the rose. The wish is not the rose. In layering these words and concepts, we step away from the direct, silent intimacy with the rose's suchness, its texture, its scent, its sheer existence. Mindfulness of silence is the practice of meeting the world in its suchness, where peace resides. Let us continue our journey into the heart of quiet. Having stepped away from the mapmaker's tower, we find ourselves here, in the living forest of direct experience. It can feel vulnerable, this wordless space. We are so accustomed to the fortress of our thoughts, the banner of our speech flying high to declare who we are. To lower the banner feels like surrender. But it is a surrender to what is real, to what has been here all along, beneath the narration. I remember a winter many years ago, a period of great internal conflict. My mind was a battleground of shoulds and what-ifs. I decided to take a silent walk during a heavy snowfall. At first, my internal war raged on, projected onto the white landscape. This is lonely. This is pointless. I should be doing something productive. But the snow had a different agenda. It fell with a relentless, silent gentleness, covering everything, the path, the bare branches, the distant sounds of the world. Step by step, breath by breath, its quiet began to seep into me. The arguing voices grew muffled, as if buried under a soft, white blanket. I wasn't trying to silence them. The silence of the falling snow was simply more compelling, more complete. I stopped walking and stood still. In that moment, there was no thinker, no problem, no past, no future. There was only this, the cool kiss of flakes on my face, the profound hush of the world, and a peace so vast it felt like the sky itself had come down to hold me. The conflict wasn't solved, it was seen as insignificant against the backdrop of this silent, all-accepting presence. That walk taught me that silence isn't something you do, it's something you allow to enter when you stop filling every crevice with the sound of yourself. In Buddhism, this points to the concept of anatta, or non-self. It is not a nihilistic denial of personality, but a profound insight that what we call the self is a fluid, contingent process, not a solid, permanent thing. Our compulsive speech is the glue that holds this illusion of solidity together. Each statement of, I am, I think, I want, is another layer of lacquer on the statue. Silence allows the lacquer to soften. We begin to see the statue is made of changing materials, sensations, perceptions, mental formations. In the quiet, we stop identifying with the statue and start resting as the space in which it appears. This is liberating. The burdens of defending, promoting, and maintaining this self begin to dissolve. What remains is a lighter, more authentic presence. Consider this metaphor. Imagine you are a clear glass vase. The water inside is your innate awareness, still and pure. Now, imagine each unnecessary word, each bout of gossip, each anxious rehearsal of a conversation, each moment of speaking just to fill space. These are drops of ink. Plink. Plink. Plop. They fall into the water of your awareness. At first, the ink disperses in beautiful, swirling patterns. You might even find them interesting. Look at my complicated thoughts. But as the ink drops continue, the water becomes murky, then dark, then opaque. You can no longer see through the glass. You forget the water was ever clear. You believe you are the dark, opaque liquid. Your entire worldview is colored by this murkiness. Silence is the cessation of the ink drops. It is not an aggressive filtering of the water, that would just stir it up more. It is the patient, compassionate act of stopping. Of no longer adding to the murk. And then, as you sit in stillness, gravity does its work. The ink particles, no longer agitated by new drops, begin to settle. Slowly, slowly, the water regains its clarity. You begin to see through the glass again, to perceive the world without the distortion of your own mental and verbal effluent. The clarity was always there. It is your nature. You just stopped obscuring it. Now, let me share another story with you. In the great city of Viridian, there existed a library so vast it was said to hold the echo of every word ever spoken. Its keeper was the librarian of whispers, an ancient woman who moved through the endless corridors not with her eyes, but with her ears. The library was not silent. It was a cacophony of murmurs, arguments from centuries past, declarations of love, secret confessions, idle chatter, all preserved in the mystical air. The librarian's duty was to maintain the balance of sound, to ensure no single voice grew too loud and shattered the delicate archives. A young scholar, Aaron, famed for his brilliant and torrential lectures, came to research the nature of history. He entered the library and was delighted. Here was the raw material of humanity. He began to speak, adding his own booming voice to the chorus, quoting, analyzing, debating with the ancient whispers. As he spoke, a strange thing happened. The whispers around him grew agitated, then loud, then chaotic. Arguments from different eras began to clash. A love poem tangled with a declaration of war. The library's atmosphere grew tense, unstable. The librarian appeared soundlessly at his elbow. She did not shout over the din. She placed a single, cool finger on her own lips. Then, she reached out and gently, ever so gently, placed that same finger against Aaron's lips. The effect was instantaneous. The moment his own voice ceased, the agitated whispers in his immediate vicinity began to calm. They didn't disappear, they settled back into their proper place in the tapestry of sound. The librarian took his hand and led him to a small, enclosed reading room deep in the stacks. Here, the silence was absolute, a bubble in the ocean of whispers. She handed him a blank piece of parchment and a quill. On a slate, she wrote. To understand the word, you must first understand the silence that holds it. Read not with your voice, but with your silence. Humiliated and confused, Aaron remained. Days passed. He sat in the silent room, his own mind throwing a tantrum of unspoken words. But eventually, it too grew quiet. Only then did the librarian allow him to re-enter the stacks. This time, he did not speak. He walked, and he listened. And a miracle occurred. He no longer heard a chaotic din. He began to hear threads. He could follow a single philosophical idea as it wove through centuries, evolving. He could hear the consistent, mournful whisper of human grief beneath 1,000 different stories. He could hear the bright, fragile thread of joy. He was no longer adding to the noise, he was discerning the music within it. He left the library months later, a transformed man. He still taught, but his lectures were now punctuated by potent, listening silences. People said they didn't just hear his words. They heard the centuries of wisdom echoing in the spaces between them. Our mind is that library. It is filled with the whispers of every thought, memory, and conditioning we have ever accumulated. Our habitual speech is like Aaron's booming voice, agitating the entire system, creating internal chaos and obscuring the deeper patterns. Meditation and mindful silence are the practice of entering the inner reading room. We step out of the stacks of our thoughts and rest in the pure silence that contains them. From that place of settled awareness, we can re-engage with our inner world not as a chaotic force to be battled, but as a historical text to be understood with compassion. We hear the whispers without becoming them. This understanding is deeply embedded in the Buddha's teaching on dependent origination. It shows us how suffering arises dependent on conditions. One link in that chain is mental proliferation, or papanka. This is the mind's tendency to take a simple sensation or perception and spin it into an elaborate story, a web of concepts, likes, dislikes, and self-reference. Speech is the physical manifestation of this proliferation. We feel a slight coolness, sensation. Perceive it as a draft, perception, proliferated into, someone left the window open, they're so inconsiderate, I'm always cold in this house, no one respects me. Mental proliferation, and then we speak it, who left this window open? It's freezing in here. Suffering has now been externalized and solidified. Silence, coupled with mindfulness, allows us to intercept this chain at the point of sensation or perception. We feel the coolness. We note cool. We let it be, without the story. The proliferation slows, and the potential for suffering dissipates before it ever reaches our tongue. Between two prosperous but feuding villages ran a deep, wild river. The only bridge was an ancient, sturdy thing made of stone and oak. For generations, the villagers used it to trade insults, accusations, and sometimes arrows. The bridge carried not just goods, but the heavy traffic of grievances. A great flood one spring washed the stone bridge away. Despair set in. Trade halted. The feud, deprived of its conduit, festered in isolation. One day, a wandering sage arrived. He assessed the situation and made a startling proposal. Instead of a stone bridge, he would teach them to build a bridge of feathers. The villagers scoffed. Impossible. But the sage was insistent. He asked each villager, from the eldest to the youngest, to contribute one feather from their pillow or cloak. He collected thousands. His construction method was even more bizarre. He had the people sit on opposite banks, facing each other. He gave them two instructions. First, they must hold their feather gently before them. Second, they must not speak. Not a word. They must simply sit, hold their feather, and look across the river at the faces of those they had called enemies. Days passed in silent vigil. At first, the silence was thick with unspoken anger. But as the sun rose and set, something shifted. Without words to reinforce the old stories, the stories themselves began to lose their power. People saw the weariness in the eyes opposite. They saw a mother comforting a child, an old man smiling at the sunset, universal human acts, unfiltered by narrative. The silence became a shared experience, a common ground more real than their arguments. On the seventh day, a gentle, steady breeze began to blow upstream. The sage gave a signal. As one, the villagers released their feathers. The thousands of feathers, caught in the current of air, floated gently across the river, catching the light, a soft, swirling cloud of white and gray. They didn't form a physical bridge, but for a long, breathless moment, the air between the two banks was solid with a bridge of beauty and shared breath. In that moment, a woman on one side spontaneously began to hum a lullaby her grandmother had sung, a tune unknown on the opposite bank. A man on the other side, tears in his eyes, recognized the universal sound of comfort. He picked up a flute and softly played along, finding the harmony. No one ever rebuilt the stone bridge. They built simple, separate rafts for trade. But the real connection, the bridge of feathers, remained. It was the understanding that had grown in the silent space between their fixed positions. They learned that their words had been the stones of the old bridge. Heavy, solid, and capable of bearing the weight of war. Silence was the space that allowed for something lighter, more forgiving, and more connective to take flight. Our relationships are often burdened by these stone bridges of solidified speech, past arguments, labels, fixed stories about who the other person is. We keep crossing them, re-injuring ourselves. The practice of sacred silence in communication is the building of the bridge of feathers. It is having the courage to put down the stones of our grievances, to sit in the vulnerable quiet across from another soul, and to simply behold them, without the filter of our commentary. In that quiet, something new, something feather-light and real, can float into the space between you. It may not solve every problem, but it changes the ground upon which all problems are held. The Buddha emphasized loving-kindness or metta. Often, we think of this as something we actively broadcast. But the deepest metta can be a silent, receptive presence. It is creating a space of non-judgmental quiet around another person, allowing them to simply be, without needing to manage our reactions or opinions. This silent, allowing presence is one of the greatest gifts we can offer. It says, "You are safe here. You exist, and that is enough." Let us move gently deeper into this exploration. The bridge of feathers shows us how silence can create a new, tender space between ourselves and others. But what of the silence within our own being, the space between our thoughts? This is where the true alchemy occurs. It is one thing to hold quiet in company, it is another to face the vast and sometimes startling landscape of your own inner quiet. There is a memory from my own practice that comes to mind. After I began to seriously explore meditation, I experienced what many do. A period of heightened inner noise. It was as if by trying to be quiet, I had given the chatter a megaphone. Frustrated, I confessed this to a teacher. He listened and then asked, "When you walk into a dusty room and open a window, what happens? The sun shines in, and you see all the dust floating in the air," I replied. "Exactly," he said. The sun was always there. The dust was always there. You simply created the conditions to see it clearly. The silence is not creating the chatter. It is the light that reveals it. Do not curse the dust for existing in the light. Just keep the window open, and in time, it will settle. That shifted everything. I stopped fighting the noise and began to see it as simply old dust, stirred up by the fresh air of my attention, destined to settle in its own time. This reflects a fundamental Buddhist principle: acknowledgement without aversion. The second noble truth teaches that suffering arises from craving and aversion. We crave pleasant states and avert from unpleasant ones. We crave the good silence of perfect peace and avert from the bad silence filled with mental noise. But this very aversion, the frustration, the feeling of failure, is the extra layer of suffering. The practice is to allow all of it, the dust and the sunlight, with equanimity. To be the open window, not the judge of the room's cleanliness. Let us envision the mind in a new way. Imagine your awareness as a vast, open plain under a night sky. Your thoughts are like shooting stars. They streak across the darkness, brilliant, trailing light, and then are gone. Your habitual speech and internal narration are like a person lying on that plain, pointing at each star and shouting, "Look! That one is mine. That one means I'm successful. Oh no, that dark streak is a bad omen." You are so busy claiming, naming, and fearing these transient flashes that you miss the profound, still beauty of the sky itself, the immense, dark, silent container that holds them all. The stars are not the problem. The problem is your identification with the pointer, the namer. Silence is the practice of lowering your pointing finger. It is resting as the plane, watching the meteoric thoughts blaze and vanish, while you remain, grounded and vast. The silence is the sky. It is not the absence of stars, it is the space that allows them to be seen at all. Now, let me tell you a story about a different kind of craft. In a city obsessed with progress, master clockmaker Silas was a relic. He built and repaired intricate mechanical clocks, the kind with dozens of tiny gears, wheels, and swinging pendulums that filled a room with a glorious, synchronized chorus of ticks, tocks, whirs, and chimes. The city's officials prized efficiency above all, and they commissioned Silas to build the Grand Regulator, a master clock to synchronize all the city's timepieces. They demanded it be the loudest, most impressive sound imaginable, a symbol of their control over time itself. Silas worked for a year. The clock he built was a masterpiece of complexity, a beast of brass and iron. But when he unveiled it, the officials were horrified. It was almost silent. One could hear the soft, breath-like whisper of oiled metal, the faintest tick like a heartbeat, and a chime so pure and low it was felt more than heard. "This is useless," they cried. "We cannot hear it from the square. It does not command." Silas, a man of few words, simply asked for 3 days. He invited the officials to sit in a clock tower with him, in shifts, for 1 hour each. Reluctantly, they agreed. The first to sit was the impatient mayor. In the quiet tower, away from the city's din, he fidgeted. But as he sat, he began to hear the clock. Not as a noise, but as a presence. He felt its slow, immense pulse in his own chest. He heard the perfect, fractal harmony of hundreds of tiny parts moving in flawless relation. He emerged an hour later, strangely calm, saying, "It doesn't tell the time. It is time." The next was the anxious treasurer. He heard in the silent, efficient meshing of gears a metaphor for balanced accounts, for resources flowing without waste or friction. He felt his own frantic mental calculations slow to match the clock's serene rhythm. One by one, they sat in the silence of the masterpiece. They discovered that the clock's power was not in dominating the soundscape, but in creating a field of ordered silence so profound that it allowed them to hear their own inner chaos. And then to feel it settle into a new, peaceful rhythm. The grand regulator was never heard in the square. But those who spent time in its tower carried its silent rhythm out into the city, making decisions with more patience, speaking with more consideration. The city didn't become louder with control, it became quieter with a newfound, internal harmony. We are all clockmakers of our own lives. We build intricate structures of schedule, obligation, and identity, and we often want them to clang and chime impressively, to prove our worth to the world. We fear that if we are quiet, we will be overlooked, our mechanisms deemed useless. But the masterpiece of a harmonious life is not found in the volume of our output, but in the silent, precise integration of all our parts. Meditation is sitting in the tower of your own being, listening to the soft, perfect whisper of your heart, the gentle meshing of breath and awareness. In that quiet, you stop trying to command time and start embodying its peaceful, rhythmic flow. Your life becomes regulated from within, by a silence so potent it organizes the noise around it. This touches on the Buddha's teaching of samma samadhi, or right concentration. Concentration is not a forced, grim focusing. It is the natural settling of the mind when it is no longer scattered by the pursuit of sensory chatter and mental commentary. It is the silent gear at the center of the clockwork, the still point that allows all other movements to be coherent. We achieve this not by adding more effort, but by subtracting distraction. And the primary distraction we subtract is our own unnecessary verbal and mental noise. Consider the energy we expend. Imagine you have a lantern with a finite amount of oil, representing your vital life force, your prana or jing. Every time you speak without mindfulness, it is like opening the lantern's shutter unnecessarily, letting the flame flare and the oil burn faster. Gossip is a wide, wasteful flare. Arguing to be right is a raging, hot blaze. Anxious internal planning is a constant, flickering drip of fuel. At the end of a day spent in such profligate speech, your lantern is dim, your energy depleted. You feel spiritually and physically tired. Conscious silence is the practice of being a guardian of the flame. You keep the shutter closed when light is not needed. You tend the wick, you conserve the oil. This conserved energy does not vanish. It accumulates as a steady, radiant glow within. This stored light becomes the fuel for insight, for compassion, for healing, for true creativity. It is the light that allows you to see clearly in the darkness, not the sporadic, dazzling flare that blinds you and burns out. In a hidden valley surrounded by sheer cliffs, there was a garden unlike any other. It was called the Garden of Echoes. Any sound made within it would bounce off the cliffs, returning minutes, hours, or even days later, changed by its journey through the misty air. A laugh might return as a sigh. A shout might return as a distant chorus. A young woman named Lyra, carrying a heart full of sorrow and anger, stumbled into this valley. Unaware of its nature, she sat among the strange, silent flowers and began to speak. She poured out her grievances, against fate, against those who had wronged her, against her own weaknesses. Her words, sharp and hot, flew from her lips. She lived in the valley for a week. And then, the garden began to speak back. Her angry words returned, but stretched and distorted into monstrous, haunting wails that filled the night. Her self-pity returned as a cold, dripping mockery. The valley was giving her back her own inner world, amplified and transformed. She was terrified, a prisoner of her own echoed speech. One morning, in despair, she stopped speaking altogether. The silence was a relief, but it was also heavy. Days passed in wordlessness. Then, one afternoon, exhausted, she hummed a fragment of a lullaby her mother had sung, a mere 3 notes. It was an act not of expression, but of comfort, a reaching for a memory of peace. 2 days later, as the sun set, the echo returned. But the 3 notes had changed. They had multiplied, harmonized with the valley's own tones, and came back as a beautiful, ethereal choir that seemed to hang in the golden light. It was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. It held her sorrow, but had alchemized it into something sacred. Lyra understood. The garden did not judge. It simply showed her the true nature of her speech. Harsh words, born of pain, would only ever return as more refined forms of pain. But a fragment of true feeling, offered without agenda, could be transformed into beauty. She learned to speak only from a place of settled truth. She would sit for hours, listening to the silence, until the impulse to speak arose from a deep, clear well within, not from the turbulent surface of her emotions. The garden's echoes became a mirror for her soul, and she a careful gardener of what seeds she would plant in the air. Our life is the garden of echoes. The world, our relationships, our circumstances, returns to us the essential quality of the energy we put forth. Our speech is the seed. Mindless, reactive, bitter speech will inevitably circle back, perhaps in a different form, as conflict, as lost opportunity, as internal anxiety. Speech that arises from a place of inner silence, of clarity and compassion, returns as connection, understanding, and unexpected grace. The practice is to become a gardener who tends the soil of silence first, so that the seeds we plant with our words are chosen with care, and are worthy of the echo they will create. The Buddha's teaching on karma is intimately linked to this. Karma is not fate, it is intentional action. Speech is one of the primary fields of karma. Every word is an action that plants a seed. The fruit of that seed will be experienced in the quality of our mind and our world. Silence is the fertile fallow period, the space where we stop planting reactive, weed-like seeds and prepare the soil for something intentional and wholesome to grow. We have explored the inner clockwork and the echoing valleys. Let us now prepare to look at another facet, how this practice of silent awareness meets the relentless pace of the modern world. But that is for our next step. Let us continue. We have sat in the clockmaker's tower and listened to the garden's returning echoes. We have seen how silence is not a withdrawal, but a profound engagement with the true substance of life. Now, let us address the heart of the modern dilemma. The ceaseless stream. We live in a world that venerates the stream, of information, of communication, of constant updates. We are told to stay connected, to be informed, to share our process. To step out of this stream, even for a moment, feels like risking irrelevance, like falling behind. But what if the stream is pulling us away from the very source that gives our life depth and meaning? What if we are so busy navigating the current that we have forgotten we are the riverbank, the steady earth from which the water flows? There was a period in my life when I was a devoted follower of the stream. I had multiple screens, constant notifications, a schedule packed with back-to-back conversations. I was a good communicator, I believed. But I began to notice a strange hollowness. My interactions felt like surface skimming. My own thoughts felt borrowed, reactive. I decided on a radical experiment, a single day of digital and verbal fasting. No screens, no phone, no speaking unless absolutely necessary. The first few hours were a physical anxiety, a gnawing sense of missing out. But as the day wore on, the anxiety peeled away, layer by layer, like old paint. What was revealed underneath was not emptiness, but a rich, textured presence I had been too busy to notice. The way the light moved across the floor, the complex taste of a simple apple, the symphony of neighborhood sounds that were not meant for me, but were beautiful in their anonymous existence. By afternoon, a deep, forgotten creativity stirred. Not an idea for a project, but a creativity of being, a spontaneous noticing of patterns in the wood grain, a feeling of kinship with the old maple tree outside the window. I wasn't generating content. I was in communion with the content of the world itself. That day didn't solve my problems, but it changed my relationship to them. I saw them not as urgent headlines scrolling in my mind, but as weather patterns in the sky of my life, to be observed with a little more space, a little less identification. This is the essence of mindfulness or sati in the Buddhist teaching. It is often translated as remembrance, but not of the past. It is remembering to be present, right here, right now. Our digital and verbal noise is the primary force of forgetfulness. It pulls us into the virtual past, news, memories, and the imagined future, plans, worries. Mindful silence is the act of remembering your actual feet on the actual ground, your actual breath in your actual lungs. It is the homecoming to the only time and place life ever happens, this present moment. Think of your attention as a precious, clear water. The world of constant speech and media is a complex network of pipes and channels, all demanding that your water flow into them, to turn their mills, to fill their reservoirs. Your attention is diverted, split, and used for purposes not your own. You feel drained because your water is everywhere but at your own source. Silence is the act of gently closing the valves. One by one, you shut off the pipes to the news channel, the social feed, the internal rehearsal, the needless conversation. The water, no longer pulled outward, begins to pool. It settles. The sediment of agitation sinks. And there, in the deepening stillness, you find your own source spring, a well of peace, intuition, and authentic vitality that has been waiting underground all along. From this full reservoir, you can then choose, consciously, which channels to open, and how much water to give. You are no longer a slave to the plumbing of the world, you are the steward of your own spiritual watershed. Here is another story. In a bustling port city, there was a painter named Cora who was famous for her portraits. She captured not just likeness, but an essence, a glint of ambition in a merchant's eye, the quiet sorrow of a fisherman's wife. But Cora herself was growing weary. She felt she was only painting the masks people wore for the world, the selves presented by their speech and posture. One day, A mysterious patron commissioned a portrait with a peculiar condition: Cora must paint her subject, a retired ship's navigator named Old Finn, only during his daily 2-hour afternoon nap. She could not speak to him, nor he to her. She must paint him as he slept. Cora was perplexed but agreed. She set up her easel in Finn's quiet, sun-drenched cottage. He would settle into his armchair by the window, and within minutes, be asleep. And Cora would paint. The first few sessions were frustrating. She was painting an old man asleep. It felt like a still life, not a portrait. But forced into silence, with her subject in a state of wordless vulnerability, she had no choice but to look deeper. She stopped trying to capture and began to receive. She noticed the way the piece smoothed the chronic worry from his brow. She saw how his hands, calloused from ropes and rudders, lay open and gentle in his lap. She observed the subtle, rhythmic flutter of his eyelids, as if he were dreaming of vast, silent oceans. She painted the light not as it fell on him, but as it seemed to emanate from him in his rest, a soft, golden glow of accumulated calm. When the portrait was finished, it was unlike anything she had ever done. It didn't shout, "Navigator," or "Old man." It whispered, "Peace." It hummed, "Journey's End." When Finn saw it, he grew very still, then a single tear traced the leathery groove of his cheek. "You have painted my favorite part of myself," he said, his voice a soft rumble. "The part that is always home, no matter how far the voyage." This experience transformed Cora's art. She began to insist on silent sittings. She asked her subjects to refrain from speaking, to simply be. She found that when the performance of personality ceased, the true essence, the unseen quiet self, would gradually reveal itself like the moon emerging from behind clouds. Her portraits became sought after not for their flattery, but for their profound truth. People said, "Cora doesn't paint what you look like. She paints who you are when you stop telling the world who you are." We are all portrait artists of our own lives. We spend our days painting the presented self. The competent one, the funny one, the wounded one, with our words and actions. We are so busy applying these brushstrokes that we lose touch with the silent subject sitting in the chair of our own awareness. Meditation is the daily practice of taking a nap from this performance. It is sitting in the sunlit cottage of your being, closing the eyes of your persona, and allowing the true, quiet essence to be present. In that wordless rest, you are repainted by a light not your own. You remember the part of you that is always home. This connects to the Buddhist teaching on suchness or tathata. It is the isness of things, prior to our labels and stories. Old Finn asleep was suchness. His navigator title, his stories of the sea, were the labels. Cora's silence allowed her to bypass the label and commune with the suchness. Our own inner chatter is a constant labeling of our experience. This is good. This is boring. I am anxious. This labeling creates a secondary reality that we then live in, a portrait painted by our thoughts. Silent awareness is dropping the brush. It is letting the suchness of the moment, the feeling of the breath, the sound in the room, the simple fact of being alive, be what it is, without the need to frame it in the gallery of our opinions. High in the mountains was a town divided by a single, deep belief, the belief in the importance of the bell. In the East End, they revered the dawn bell, rung vigorously each morning to wake the town to productivity, to action, to the day's work. Its sound was sharp, clear, commanding. In the West End, they cherished the dusk bell, tolled slowly each evening to signal rest, reflection, and gratitude. Its sound was deep, resonant, and soothing. The two factions argued incessantly. Eastenders claimed the dusk bell encouraged laziness. Westenders claimed the dawn bell created anxiety. The town square, where the bells hung, was a place of tension, not community. A young girl named Alara, who loved the mountains more than the town's debates, noticed something the adults did not. She noticed that in the precise, silent moment between the last echo of the dawn bell fading and the first sounds of the day beginning, there existed a perfect, pregnant quiet. And again, in the moment after the dusk bell's final note dissolved into the twilight, there was another profound silence, deeper and more velvety. She found these interstitial silences to be the most beautiful parts of the day. One year, a great snowstorm silenced the world. Drifts piled so high the bell ropes were buried. For 3 days, no bell could be rung. The townspeople, trapped in their homes, were initially agitated. But as the silent snow continued to fall, a collective calm descended. The artificial boundary between dawn energy and dusk energy blurred. People rested when tired, worked when inspired, guided by their own internal rhythms, not by a bell. On the 4th day, as the sun broke through, Alara went to the square. She did not dig out a bell rope. Instead, she began to build something in the fresh snow. A magnificent, intricate snow sculpture of 2 bells, their clappers forever stilled, merging into a single, silent arch. People gathered, not to argue, but in wonder at the beauty she had created from the silence. The mayor, seeing the peaceful crowd and the symbolic arch, had a revelation. He declared that henceforth, the bells would be rung only once a week, as a remembrance. The true markers of the day would be the shared moments of silence the town would now observe at dawn and dusk. A quiet for intention, a quiet for gratitude. The town, united by the shared experience of intentional silence, became known for its wisdom and deep peace. They had discovered that the purpose of the bell is not the noise it makes, but the conscious silence it can frame. Our minds are often like that divided town, caught between the clanging bells of past, regret, memory, and future, anticipation, anxiety. We are pulled between the drive to produce and the longing to rest. The conflict is deafening. Mindfulness is the discovery of the silent space between these bells. It is the gap between thoughts, the pause between breaths. In that gap, there is no division, no argument. There is just presence. By intentionally framing our days with moments of such silence, upon waking, before sleep, before a meal, we do not destroy our productivity or our rest. We sanctify them. We create an arch of awareness under which both can coexist harmoniously. The silence is the unifying principle. The Buddha taught the middle way, the path between extremes of asceticism and indulgence, between striving and laziness. The silent awareness we cultivate is the very embodiment of this middle way. It is not the lethargy of the dusk bell, nor the agitation of the dawn bell. It is the wise, awake, balanced presence that can hear both, yet is enslaved by neither. It is the still point at the center of the pendulum's swing. We have navigated from the digital stream to the portrait of the unseen, to the town that found peace between bells. Let us now turn our gaze inward once more, to the most intimate relationship of all, our relationship with our own body and its sensory world. This is where the practice of silence becomes not just mental, but profoundly physical. Let us move now from the architecture of our days to the very ground of our being, the physical vessel we inhabit. We have spoken of the mind's chatter, the world's noise. But silence has a profound physical dimension that is often overlooked. It is not merely an absence of sound in the ears, but a quality of sensation in the entire body. To be silent is to feel more, not less. I remember a severe bout of laryngitis that left me unable to speak for a week. At first, it was an exercise in frustration, a prison of unexpressed thoughts. But as the days passed, a shift occurred. Deprived of its primary outlet, my attention turned inward to my body with a new intensity. I became aware of the constant, subtle tension in my jaw, held ready to form words. I felt the fluttering in my throat that usually preceded speech. I noticed how often I would physically lean forward, girding myself to enter a conversational fray. In the silence, these habitual tensions began to soften, to unwind. Without the need to project a voice, my shoulders dropped. My breathing, no longer punctuated by speech, grew longer, slower, more rhythmic. I began to feel a deep, thrumming aliveness in my hands, my feet, my spine, a vitality that had been covertly siphoned off to fuel my verbal identity. The silence became a somatic experience, a homecoming to the animal quiet of the body. When my voice returned, it felt like a new instrument, one I could choose to play, rather than an automatic machine I was trapped inside. This bodily awareness is central to the Buddha's teaching. The very foundation of mindfulness, as taught in the Satipatthana Sutta, is mindfulness of the body. We start with the breath, with the posture, with the simple, wordless sensations of walking, standing, sitting, lying down. Why? Because the body exists almost entirely in the present moment. It is a direct portal into the now, bypassing the time-traveling stories of the mind. A twinge in the knee is now. The coolness of water on hands is now. The body does not speak in past or future tense. By anchoring our attention in these bodily sensations, we train ourselves to inhabit the silent, eternal present. The mind's noise is like a radio playing in another room. Focusing on the body is like stepping into a soundproof booth where you can hear your own heart. Imagine your body as a landscape at night. The chattering mind is like a person wandering this landscape with a blazing torch, swinging it wildly. The light is frantic, startling, casting long, dancing shadows that look like monsters. It illuminates only fragments, a tree root here, a rock there, but creates a sense of threat and disorientation. The practice of silent bodily awareness is like dousing that torch and letting your eyes adjust to the moonlight. At first, it seems darker. But then, a softer, more comprehensive vision emerges. You see the shape of the entire hillside. You see the path not as a series of isolated, illuminated hazards, but as a clear ribbon through the field. You see the true scale of things. The monsters are revealed as bushes. The peace of the night enters you. The moonlight of silent awareness doesn't create the landscape, it reveals it as it truly is, whole and peaceful. Let me share a story about this embodied silence. In a desert kingdom, tapestries were the highest art, telling stories of history and myth. The most coveted threads were spun from the breath of the sacred, silent dromedaries that crossed the dunes. The weaver who could collect this breath silk was revered. An old weaver named Zara was the last who knew the true method. A young, ambitious weaver, Kale, sought her secret. He imagined a complex device, a bellows, a net, a musical lure. He followed the camels, his mind whirring with plans, his tongue muttering incantations. The camels remained unmoved, their breath ordinary. Finally, in defeat, he went to Zara's simple tent at the oasis edge. He found her sitting, eyes closed, not weaving, not doing anything. A single dromedary lay peacefully beside her, its flanks slowly rising and falling. Hours seemed to pass. Kale grew impatient. "When do you collect the breath?" he whispered. Zara opened her eyes, smiled, and pointed to a small, unfinished tapestry on her lap. It was the most extraordinary thing Kale had ever seen. The thread seemed woven from dawn light and twilight, holding a quality of immense space and calm. "I am not collecting," Zara said, her voice as soft as sand shifting. "I am matching. I sit until my own breath becomes as slow, as deep, as silent as his." She placed a hand on her own belly, then gestured to the camels. When there is no difference between the rhythm inside and the rhythm outside, the silence between the breaths becomes a loom. The breath silk spins itself from that shared stillness. It is not taken, it is offered, from one silent being to another. Kale understood. He put aside his tools and his plans. He began the only real work, sitting, breathing, letting the desert silence erase the boundary between himself and the world. It took months. But one evening, as he sat with a camel at sunset, he felt it, a seamless, silent synchrony. And in the basket by his side, a few strands of luminous thread had appeared, as if condensed from the peace itself. He had learned that the most precious things are not captured by striving and strategy, but are born from the silent alignment of your own being with the rhythm of existence. Our true creative power, our healing, our peace, they are like that breath silk. We cannot grab them with the frantic hands of our thinking mind. We can only create the inner conditions, the silent, rhythmic, attentive presence, in which they spontaneously arise. Our culture prizes the collection, the acquisition, the spoken plan. Zara's wisdom points to the power of the match, the inner alignment that happens only in wordless presence. This is deeply aligned with the Buddhist concept of samadhi, often translated as concentration or unification. It is not a strained focus, but a natural collectedness, a unification of mind with its object. In deep samadhi, the meditator and the breath become one. The observer and the observed merge. This is the ultimate matching Zara spoke of. It is a state of profound, silent intimacy with life itself, from which all wisdom and compassion flow. We access it not by thinking about silence, but by becoming silent with something, the breath, a sound, a sensation. Now, consider the energy of speech from a physiological view. Every time you speak, you initiate a complex cascade in the body. The diaphragm contracts, the vocal cords tense, the facial muscles engage, neurotransmitters fire. It is a full-body event, especially if the speech is charged with emotion. Frequent, unnecessary speech keeps the body in a state of low-grade readiness, a sympathetic nervous system arousal akin to a constant, background, fight or flight. Silence, particularly mindful silence, allows the body to switch into the parasympathetic, rest and digest, mode. The heart rate slows, muscles relax, digestion improves. The body begins to repair and restore itself. This is not a metaphor. It is a biological fact. Choosing silence is choosing to give your body a healing bath in its own native state of calm. You are not just saving mental energy, you are conducting a somatic symphony of restoration. In the center of a once bustiful plaza, there stood a magnificent fountain. It was engineered to be spectacular, water jetting from a dozen spouts in complex, interweaving patterns, lit by colored lights at night, accompanied by scheduled music. It was the city's pride. But over time, people began to avoid the plaza. The constant splash and crash was overwhelming. The show felt aggressive, demanding attention. The space around it felt drained, not energized. A new city gardener, a quiet woman named Anya, proposed a radical change: turn the fountain off for one season. The council, seeing the plaza abandoned anyway, reluctantly agreed. The silence when the pump stopped was shocking. Then, as the last trickle drained away, people noticed the beautiful, sculpted basin they had never really seen, crusted with vibrant green moss. They saw the way the stone held the sunlight. Birds began to bathe in the shallow puddles. Children would sit on the dry rim, talking in hushed voices, their sounds not drowned out. The plaza became a place of quiet congregation, of reflection. Anya didn't leave it empty. She planted a garden in the broad basin, ferns, mosses, small shade-loving flowers that thrived in the moist, protected environment. It became a living, breathing, quiet centerpiece. The sound was of leaves rustling, of water gently dripping from a simple, small copper cup she placed to catch condensation, which overflowed once a day with a soft, singular plink. People loved it. They said the new fountain of stillness didn't entertain them, it invited them. It didn't take their energy, it gave them peace. When asked if she missed the old spectacle, Anya said, the old fountain showed what water could be made to do. This one shows what water, and we, naturally, are when left to be still. We are vessels that fill, and then overflow with simplicity. The spectacle was a performance. This is a presence. Our nervous system is that plaza fountain. Modern life has us jetting in a dozen directions, lit up with stimulation, accompanied by a soundtrack of our own making. It is exhausting. The practice of silence is turning off the pumps. It is allowing the chaotic, spectacular display to cease so that we can see the beautiful, moss-grown basin of our own being. We discover a different kind of life thriving there, slower, greener, more resilient. And from that full, still basin, a natural overflow occurs, not a forced spectacle of productivity, but a gentle, nourishing drip of authentic creativity, kindness, and peace. The plink of a single, mindful action becomes more meaningful than the roaring cascade of busyness. The Buddha frequently used the metaphor of water to describe the mind. A restless mind is like water churned up, muddy. A settled mind is like still water, clear and reflective. The Fountain of Stillness story takes this a step further. It's not just about letting the mud settle to see clearly, it's about discovering that the purpose of the fountain isn't the frantic display, but the peaceful, life-giving pool it becomes when the striving stops. Our purpose isn't our output. Our purpose is our presence. These teachings inevitably bring us to the edge of our relationships with others. If silence is so rich, so healing, so revealing, what does it mean for how we connect? Does it lead to isolation? Or does it, perhaps, pave the way for a connection far deeper than words can ever build? We will turn to that fertile ground next. Let us now turn our attention from the inner fountain to the space between selves. We have explored the silence within the body, the stillness at our core. But human life is relational. We are woven into a web of connections, and this web is most often spun with threads of speech. What happens when we introduce silence into this web? Does it weaken the connections, or does it, perhaps, reveal a stronger, more enduring material holding us together? I recall a time of profound grief, when words were not just inadequate, but felt like a desecration of the loss. A friend, instead of offering the usual consolations, "He's in a better place, time will heal," simply came and sat with me. For hours, we sat in the quiet of my living room. She did not try to fix the unfixable with language. Her silence was not empty, it was a held space, a container for my pain. It communicated something deeper than any phrase: "This is too big for words. I will not insult it or you by trying to shrink it into sentences. I will simply be here, holding the space with you." That silent companionship did more to make me feel seen and supported than any eloquent speech ever could. It taught me that the deepest communication often happens in the bandwidth beyond words, in the shared field of silent, compassionate presence. This points to a profound aspect of the Buddha's path, Sangha, or community. The spiritual journey is not meant to be walked alone. But true Sangha is not just a group of people talking about the Dharma. It is a field of mutual support where presence is valued as highly as discourse. There is a beautiful tradition in some Buddhist communities of practicing noble silence, together, eating, walking, working side by side without speech. This collective quiet is not antisocial, it is a deep social bonding on the level of being, rather than personality. It creates a unity that differences of opinion cannot shake. In that shared silence, we meet each other not as ideas or histories, but as living, breathing manifestations of the same aware presence. Consider this metaphor. Imagine each person as a unique, beautiful wind chime. When the wind of life blows, each chime sounds its distinct, melodious note. Conversation is like the chimes striking each other, sometimes creating pleasant harmonies, sometimes discordant clashes. But beneath the individual notes is the wind itself. The silent, animating breath that moves through all chimes equally. Our personal stories, opinions, and identities are our notes. The silent, aware presence within each of us is the wind. We spend most of our lives focused on the notes, comparing them, judging them, trying to control which ones sound. We forget the shared wind. Communal silence is the practice of stopping the chimes from striking each other, allowing them to simply hang still. In that stillness, we begin to feel the common wind that moves us all. We realize our fundamental connection is not in our notes, but in the silent force that gives us the capacity to sound at all. From that realization, when we do choose to let our chimes touch, the music is more harmonious, because it arises from a shared understanding of the source. Let me offer you a story about this very discovery. In the oasis town of Selima, the marketplace was legendary for its noise. A cacophony of haggling, gossip, merchants' cries, and animal sounds. Deals were made in shouted negotiations, friendships in rapid-fire chatter. Then, a strange sleep sickness swept through the town. It did not harm the body, but it took the voice. Everyone was rendered completely mute for a month. Panic ensued. How would they trade? How would they socialize? The first week was chaos. Frustrated gestures, angry scribbles on slate, a sense of isolation and despair. But necessity is a patient teacher. Slowly, new systems emerged. Instead of haggling, merchants began to display a single, fair price on a tag. Customers, unable to complain, inspected goods with more care. A new attentiveness was born. People began to notice the quality of a fabric by touch, the ripeness of fruit by scent. They communicated with their eyes, with a tilt of the head, a palm placed over the heart. A remarkable thing happened. Without words to obscure intent, people became more intuitive. A baker would see a customer's weary eyes and silently add an extra bun to their bag. A farmer, seeing a mother struggling with bundles, would simply lift them onto her cart. Trust, which had been negotiated verbally, now arose from silent, observed action. The marketplace transformed. The noise was replaced by a new music. The shuffle of feet on sand, the rustle of cloth, the clink of coins in a palm, the shared, understanding smiles. The volume of trade did not decrease, it flourished with a new efficiency and a profound courtesy. When their voices returned at month's end, the people of Selima had changed. They still spoke, but their speech was slower, more considered. They had learned that most haggling was a performance, most gossip a waste of energy. They had discovered that the essence of commerce and community was not in the noise of exchange, but in the silent integrity of the goods and the quiet attentiveness to another's need. The marketplace remained a calmer, more respectful place. They had built a new economy, not on words, but on the currency of silent, mindful presence. Our social worlds are the marketplace of Selima. We believe connection is built and maintained through constant verbal exchange. But so much of that exchange is noise. Social grooming, status signaling, fear of awkward quiet. What if we dared to enter a kind of voluntary, mindful silence in our interactions? Not a cold withdrawal, but a warm, attentive presence. We might discover, as Selima did, that understanding deepens, that trust grows from action more than promise, and that the heart communicates in a language older and wiser than words. A touch, a smile, a gesture of help from a place of quiet attention can build bridges that 1,000 words might fail to construct. This aligns with the Buddhist virtue of sakka, or truthfulness. Truthfulness is not merely about not lying. It is about alignment, your words, your actions, and your inner state being in harmony. Often, we speak out of alignment because we feel social pressure to fill space or present a certain self. Mindful silence in social settings allows us to return to our inner alignment. From that place of inner truth, if we do speak, our words are far more likely to be sakka, truthful, helpful, and rooted in reality. Now, let's consider a darker aspect of speech that silence illuminates: complaint. Complaining is the mental and verbal rejection of the present moment. It is arguing with what is. It seems harmless, even bonding. Misery loves company. But energetically, it is a profound drain. It reinforces a story of powerlessness and cements our identity as a victim of circumstances. Evan was a glassblower of great skill, but he was perpetually unhappy. His furnace, he claimed, was faulty. It was never quite hot enough, or it cooled too quickly. He complained about it to everyone, to his apprentices, to his customers, to the supplier. His days were a running monologue of grievance against the furnace. His work suffered. His glass was often strained, with subtle imperfections born of his frustration and rushed corrections. One day, a master glassblower from a distant city visited. She listened to Evan's complaints for a while as she watched him work. Finally, she held up a hand. "May I sit with your furnace?" she asked. Puzzled, Evan agreed. The woman did not inspect the bricks or the flue. She simply pulled up a stool and sat before the roaring fire, silent and still, for the better part of an hour. Evan fidgeted, feeling the pressure of the silent critique. She stood up, her face smudged with heat. "The furnace is fine," she said. "The flaw is in your breath." "My breath?" Evan scoffed. "You blow glass with the breath of complaint," she said calmly. "It is a short, hot, agitated breath, full of the story of not enough. It creates turbulence in the molten glass, a subtle vibration of dissatisfaction that gets trapped as it cools. Your mind is so loud with your grievance that you cannot hear the song of the glass as it forms. You are fighting an enemy of your own making, and the glass bears the scars of that battle." She then asked for a gather of molten glass. She took the pipe, and as she began to blow, her entire being changed. Her breath was a long, slow, steady river of air. Her eyes were soft, receptive. She seemed to be in a silent dialogue with the glowing orb, responding to its needs, not imposing her will. The glass expanded, smooth, even, radiant. "The perfect furnace," she said as she shaped a flawless vase, "is the one you stop complaining about. Your silent, accepting breath is the true heat that shapes the world. Your complaint is a leak in your own bellows." Evan was humbled. He began to practice. Before each blow, he would take a moment of silence, letting the complaint settle. He would connect with his breath, making it long and steady. He began to listen to the glass. His relationship with the furnace, and with his entire craft, transformed. The faults disappeared, not because the furnace changed, but because the blower had. He learned that the quality of his consciousness was the most critical tool in his workshop. We are all glassblowers, shaping the substance of our lives with the breath of our attention. Our complaints are a faulty breath, agitated, weak, distorting. They create imperfections in our experience, trapping stress and dissatisfaction. Silent acceptance is not passivity. It is the long, steady, powerful breath of clarity that allows us to shape our circumstances with grace and strength. When we stop complaining, we are not ignoring problems, we are ceasing to add the destructive energy of resistance to them, which allows us to see solutions with far greater clarity. The furnace of life is what it is. Our power lies in the quality of breath, the spirit, with which we meet it. The Buddha's teaching on dukkha, suffering, stress, and its cessation is directly applicable here. Complaint is the voice of dukkha. It is the rumbling of unsatisfactoriness. Mindfulness of silence is the practice of hearing that rumble without buying into its narrative, without giving it a megaphone. In the quiet space of non-complaint, we can investigate the actual cause of the stress and address it with wisdom, rather than just amplifying our discomfort to the world and ourselves. We have seen how silence transforms community and dissolves complaint. This brings us to a thrilling frontier, the role of silent awareness in unlocking creativity and insight that our noisy minds often block. We will explore that next. Let us move now to the culmination of our journey, drawing together the threads we have woven. We have traversed the inner landscape. From the noisy marketplace of the mind to the still pool of the body, from the clanging bells of time to the silent breath that shapes our glass. We have seen how silence is not an emptiness, but a presence, not a withdrawal, but the deepest form of connection, not an end to expression, but the source of all authentic expression. I want to leave you with a final, personal reflection. After decades of exploring this path, the greatest lesson silence has taught me is this. You are not the voice in the head. You are the one who hears it. This simple, seismic shift in identification is the gateway to freedom. The voice may never stop entirely, it is a function of this human instrument. But when you know yourself as the silent, aware space in which the voice appears, its power over you dissolves. It becomes like a radio left on in another room. You can acknowledge its content without being compelled to live by its news. This is the peace that passes understanding. It is not a peace that depends on quiet surroundings, but a peace that is the very fabric of your being, revealed when the static of personal narrative is turned down. This is the heart of the Buddha's awakening. Under the Bodhi tree, he didn't find a new philosophy. He ceased to identify with the content of his mind, the fears, the temptations, the memories. He rested as the unconditioned awareness that witnessed it all. He called this nibbana, nirvana. The extinguishing of the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion. These fires are fed by our grasping attachment to our thoughts and their verbal expressions. Silence, in its deepest sense, is the practice of no longer throwing fuel on those fires. It is the cool, clear space where they naturally die down, revealing the luminous, peaceful ground of being that was always here. So, what is the practical path forward from this moment? It is not about moving to a cave, though periods of retreat are precious. It is about building a monastery of the moment. Wherever you are, in your car, at your desk, washing dishes, listening to a friend, that spot is your cell. The practice is to return, again and again, to the silent awareness within that is already presiding over the activity. Let your actions, when possible, flow from that silence. Let your words, when necessary, be filtered through it. Begin with micro-silences, as we discussed. But let me offer a culminating practice, the silent beacon. As you go about your day, imagine within your chest a small, silent, unwavering flame. It is not a flame of fire, but of pure, aware presence. Your job is not to tend to the world's noise, but to tend to this flame. Notice when your attention is pulled into verbal drama, internal or external. That pulling is a wind threatening the flame. Gently, without judgment, bring your attention back to the silent beacon in your heart. Feel its steady, wordless presence. From that anchored place, re-engage. Do this not as a task, but as a homecoming. This beacon is your true self. It is your Buddha nature. Everything else is weather. Remember the stories, the potter listening to the wheels hum, the librarian discerning music in whispers, the town finding unity between bells, the glassblower with his steadying breath. You are all of them. You have the capacity to find the essential rhythm, to hear the deeper truth, to unite opposites in awareness, and to shape your life with a calm and powerful spirit. Your journey does not end when this talk ends. It begins anew with your next breath. The monk's moon temple is not just this channel, it is the sanctuary you carry within you. We have simply been sitting together in it for a while. If the silence we've shared has been a refuge, if any of these stories have been a lamp, please help us keep this sanctuary open for others. Your subscription is a key that helps lock the door against the world's noise for countless others seeking peace. Click subscribe, ring the bell, and join this quiet community. Share your experiences below, your insights are a light for fellow travelers. But more than that, carry this silence with you. Let it be your most trusted guide and your greatest gift to a weary world. Speak when love compels you. Act when wisdom directs. But beneath all doing and saying, let there be the profound, healing silence of the one who knows. Thank you for walking this path of quiet wisdom. Thank you for your listening. May the peace you have touched here grow and radiate from you, effortlessly, changing everything it touches. Be still, and know.